in this lecture, in this module in fact, we will focus on CT, X-ray based computed tomography. So, I would recommend you actually go through the introduction, signals and systems review, image quality metrics, and more importantly, when we started project in the previous module of projection radiography, the physics, right, was covered. That is namely your X-ray generation and how X-ray photons interact with the tissue and the fundamental attenuation law, all those things that constitutes the physics of the modality, right, was covered in projection radiography. So, when we cover X-ray computed tomography, I would assume you would have already gone through the previous lectures in the previous two topics. Therefore, we will proposition and start with only the instrumentation and then image formation and image quality. The physics of the modality, I would recommend that you read in the previous module, okay, of projection radiography. So, without much further delay here, let us again, most of the content I will be following the order in the text listed here, clear. So, what are we going to cover? Physics, I said you should have read it from the previous module. So, we are going to focus on instrumentation and then on image formation. I guess this is a very important module. When people talk about CT, this is an important module, and we will talk about X-ray CT. However, you will notice that the T part, the tomography, the CT part, the computed tomography part will be used in the other nuclear medicine, right, that we will be discussing as a separate module. So, this is a very important topic and actually also a very interesting topic. So, I would recommend that you kind of pay attention when you are fresh, try to go through these lectures, and more importantly, as I keep repeating, all this is a separate module, well established textbooks are there, maybe several vivid descriptions, simulations, cartoons, sketch, animations of all this might be there. However, there is no substitute to actually you go reading from somewhere and also try to get the intuition. So, I will try to help along the way, showing some examples, showing some demo, or at least how you may want to think, at least the way I think about it, that I would like to share. But there is no substitute to you actually going and taking a textbook and reading from that. Okay, you have to have your own imagination of all of the topics that we are going to cover. Okay, so we will get on with it. First is your instrumentation, right. So, before we go into instrumentation, right, even though I told that you are going to use the previous module to learn about the physics, I think it is very important. The way I would like to proposition and take this module, it is actually very historic facts, right. I mean, instrumentation is there, right. All of the material that we are going to cover, you will find it is already there factually. But what I would like to pretend, right, you have to imagine, can we grow with the evolution, right. So, when Roentgen did it, right, it was 1895, right, somewhere there, more than 120 years ago. So, that time what did we have, right, it kind of opened up, like we said, most people agree it opened up medical imaging with the X-ray first, and then we covered projection radiography. So, suddenly when after discovery you have to have an ecosystem, you create an instrument, right, you have to have a vendor who manufactures it, and then the doctors have to be trained, and then clinical applications have to evolve where all they think they can use it and make the diagnosis better. So, it takes time, and a lot of pioneers, the brains of several people have gone into in the evolution of the technology and clinical practice. So, along the way, if that solves all the problem, right, if it is super good, if you don't gain something, people will not evolve, right, people will not come up with a newer, there won't be scope for newer systems, right, there won't be any need. So clearly, even though projection radiography is a very important modality even now, right, you would notice that there was a fundamental limitation, right, that was always probably haunting the scientists at that point of time. So they wanted to overcome it. So first recognize what was projection radiography and what was the major limitation. Projection radiography, what did we do? Oh, we reduced the dimensionality, we were only using the projection. So for example, even though we know the object is 3D, right, we collapse to the plane of the paper. So essentially this is, so we will, so this is the innovation I am trying. In a typical class, when we have a projector, right, I could there will be a screen and I will stand in between the screen and the projector, so I could use my hand and you could actually see the shadow. So it will be easier. So here I am going to pretend I am going to use the optical system. So it's not through transmission, but get the idea through. So what did we do? So pretend this is all, that's your camera, right? So you are sending it. So pretend the analogous to X-rays, but you are seeing this. Okay? So you had X-ray. So this is a cube, right? Your Rubik's cube. So you have different colors, right? So optically you see it's a 3D thing, but what we were doing in projection radiography is, say for example, if I showed you like this, right? If I showed you like that, you will not know whether this is 3D or, right, you only saw the projection of this. So you would have, if you really look at it, you would see a projection where, right, I mean, to make life simple, this is what you would have seen, and this is, I am not going to color because I don't have, whatever color this pen does, I have read, maybe I will have to go pick another color, I don't want to waste time on that. But the idea is, you see one square, it is not a cube that you see, because you see the projection, and so you would have seen a square which has 3 cross 3 small squares if you are really able to pick it. Was this good? Right. So it had, so the analogous to X-ray CT is, this allowed us to project, so whatever was there on one side, right, it got projected. It, let's take this example. I had one side, right, I got this, but this is nothing but a projection of all the, see, all the 3. So you have 3 cross 3 cross 3 Rubik's, right. So it was going through this property. So instead of 3 cubes, I got the effect of all the 3 cubes. So on the input side, say for example, I put orange, right, some X-ray energy, it goes through the 3 cube elements here, which are green color. So it had some property. What you record or what falls on the detector is red. So orange you send in, red you get, and the difference is because it is attenuated along the path. So here you have 3 green cubes, right. So it is a lot, but you see the challenge. The challenge is actually I don't see the 3 of them along this. So like you have 3 here, you have 3 here, you have 3 here, which comes out to be the 3 cubes on the first row. Likewise you have the next row, third row. So essentially you have collapsed, right, all of them into a 3 cross 3 instead of 3 cross 3 into 3, right. So essentially you do not see that depth information, which was itself very powerful because you did not see anything before that. So now at least I can tell, when you send orange, I get red. So when it goes through this path, this is the loss. Where exactly that loss is distributed within that, we do not know. It was just line integral, but that itself was good enough, right. If you take a picture like this this itself was good enough for us. I don't know if you can see. So there is a logo, right? So this itself was good enough for us. I could see some suspicious, pixel, and I can say that it is within this path. It is within this center. Something has changed, which was very good. Even though I couldn't tell apart the front cube color to the back cube color, right? So I couldn't tell what is in the front or what is in the back, but that was sufficient. So lot of developments, application took place, but one of the fundamental limitation was you ended up seeing only a shadow of the 3D object. So the first and foremost thing they wanted to do is there a way we could actually go, not just measure the square. Ideally, I should get this cube. I should be able to tell all the values, right, sitting from outside. So just to make life easy, because I cannot break this into pieces. So this is one piece, right? One row, if you want to call, right? This is my imaging. So until in projection radiography, we got a projection. So it was this square that you are seeing. Whereas what we want is, we want to actually see through the depth, right? We want to see through the depth. So our images are going to be, we call this as slice. So we want this slice, and the slice is going to represent how along the path the mu's are, the attenuations are distributed. This is what we want. If we can do that for one slice, if I can do that for other slice, I can do for the third slice, then actually I have the whole cube, right? So the idea is, how do I get the depth, along the depth, how does the mu change? That is the missing part. So how do we typically do that? So that is the biggest problem. So knowing what we know, right, what information do we have? So we started with, say for example, this red. You saw the projection and it goes through this green, I get an orange as recorded value, right? This goes into your detector and you see it as an image. Now what can I do? In reality, why we see this as a 3D object? Oh, because if I keep it exactly, to my eyesight, line of eyesight, and I don't create any other, if I don't tilt it, then you will actually see it as only red green. You cannot tell the depth. But then what happens if I tilt it slightly, right? What happens if we tilt it slightly? Well, if you do this, right, if I tilted it like this, what do you see? Well, if I did a good job with respect to, right, keeping it straight, then you will see two colors, red and yellow, but you will still see only a projection of this. You will not see the depth. You will not see the depth of it. You will see only the projection of it. So the only thing that you will see is, if that is length is A and this is A, you are going to see probably square root of 2A. This will be A. So let's say this is A, this is A. So I will still see this as A, but my width will be square root of 2 times A. Clear? So then probably half of it I saw yellow color. I mean, still it will be cube, but from our perspective, whichever color I showed you, doesn't matter. Okay, I see two colors, say yellow and green. See, I think this is what I showed, yellow, red and yellow, right? So you have red on one side, again yellow on the other side. But notice it's still projected. It's still projected. So then what can I do? Oh, so I had orange and red. So what if I do like this? I have another view, red, right? I had one view like this, and then if I have like this, I just rotated by 45 degrees. The view that you see, oh, the width has increased, but you still see the projection. So it's a rectangle with two colors. I do 90 degrees, what happens? Oh, I have a yellow, I see it as, right, you see a yellow square. This again will be A cross A, but yellow square. So the point is, depending on your view, so if you actually, so the reason that you are able to see this as 3D cube is when I have it like this, when I rotate it like that, right, and if I am able to record, so your eyes are doing it, so you are recording it, you are moving it and you are registering it, and your brain interprets and it starts to visualize it as 3D. So the same process we can do, even though projection radiography had a problem with the depth. Now what I have done is, by looking at it from different views, it's still the same thing, right? We started out, if I send orange, right, I send on one side, it goes through the green, comes to the other side as red, right? So if you take one of these pixels, one of these elements, right, it is along the path, so it is still attenuating. So if I went like this 90 degrees, if you take this element, now I send white, I get yellow, I send some value, I get another value, but along this path it has reduced. So for every element you see in in all the paths, right, different angles that you want to go, they would have contributed towards that attenuation. Okay, so this is the interesting aspect. So the challenge was, how do I get the depth information? So this was bothering them, because they wanted to see the through slice, they wanted to see what is there along the depth, right? So what they did is, in CT they figured out, if you can view it from multiple different directions and record the projections, then there is enough mathematics that we can apply to get the what we call as reconstruction, right? Enough mathematics to get the slice, that is the distribution along the line. Okay. So I mean, it will take some time. I think this is an important thought process you need to start to do, because rest of it will fall in place nicely, because it's all about at that point of time, if you have enough information, knowledge on what's happening, you will, I'm sure you and I will also innovate. With due credits, it was challenging, but I think we have the privilege and luxury to actually look back, right, after it's all done, to say, oh, it's easy. So let's enjoy that process. Okay. So what we will cover is a very factual material. So this is the logic. The logic is, until projection radiography, what we covered is, we know the physics, you send on one side, you receive on the other side, along the path there is attenuation, and now the objective is, oh, I am not happy that this is the attenuation along this path. I want to know if there is a change, what is the different attenuation values along the path, not just the total. That is our goal. In order to do that, the idea is, you have to get different views. If you can get different views, then maybe we can reconstruct. So so instrumentation is going to be geared towards that. Okay. Let me put the first generation and kind of give this proposition. So you have a patient, right, that you want to image. You have the source on one side, the detector on the other side. Okay. So through transmission, what is slightly different here? Oh, what is slightly different is, in projection radiography we talked about the whole chest, right. So in principle, we should have talked about our detector also being an array. If that is the case, then the cube example is good enough. But you will have to understand that X-ray itself was developed and all the clinical applications came, this idea of depth was bothering them. But then what is their output? Oh, output is photography film, alright. That was a market that was evolving and maturing, and so photography, so their output in some sense you didn't measure, it was the output was display, right. So optical density, X-ray was converted to optical density and viewed. So all that development in material science and the ecosystem for making a scanner and the clinical participation matured over 50 years, 60 years. So then they said, look, if we want to do this, if I want to measure from different views and then be able to apply mathematics on it, so I have to do computation on it. Oh, if I have a analog, right, I have this film that is exposed, I get X-ray film in different views, right, I cannot really do computation on that, right. So the challenge was, even though it is straightforward to think that if you have a detector where you can record this, then we could take it, but they didn't have computation, right. It was starting, your semiconductor devices started coming, your diodes started coming, all post World War II, right, and then your computers started to mature. So in that sense, it was not until, remember the intro, not until 70s, right, for the work they got a Nobel Prize for in 72 or something. So it's the 70s where after 50s, 60s you had all the components. So the detector, so what you see here is the detector is not X-ray film. In projection radiography that was the case. Now you have to record the signal so that you have to do reconstruction, compute. So you cannot just have a X-ray film that is developed, okay. So your recording of the signal, so you need sensors, all that kind of readout circuit, registration, you have to have, you have to scan, so you have to have translation, rotations, all that kind of, that ecosystem with the electronics are also parallelly developing, computing was parallelly developing. So it took about 70s before there was a maturity in the electronics and mechanical design developments and motors and things like that, before they could put a system together, okay. So what you see even in the first generation is, it's not 2D array, I mean it's not just digitizing your projection radiography, life would be simple. So that time what they had is, they knew this business of X-ray tube, and you send X-ray tube, the X-rays through the body, you have to have a detector on the other side. So they got the detector on the other side. So then all they knew from the physics is, from the detector, from the source to the detector, the line joining them, right, whatever is there in the path, that is the attenuation along the path, that is going to come, the line integral is what you are going to detect. So the easiest way for them to discretize this is, they had one detector, one source, so they stepped, this is translation, so they moved from left to right, right. So if you take this cube, right, I had only one detector, one source, one path line, I had the detector on the other side. So I had only one element. So if I have to get this cube, what should I do? Oh, I should move that. So if I move 3 times, then I get, right, I am trying to, when I do 3 times, what I get? 1 row. So 1 row if I get, that means all this is collapsed along this path. So now I want the same tissue region, I have to view it from different location. So you can rotate, the 90-degree rotation is simple, I said, right. So you can step in any direction, right, any step size for different views. So the idea here is, this knowledge was there, what we call this as a pencil beam, very narrow beam, it is like a pencil, right. So now if I have to scan the patient, if I have to get this 3 cross 3 in this example of white, what the values are, then so I am going to get only one slice, right, only one slice, the one row. So I am going to do one translate, I can do many, right, I have to translate many times depending on what is the field of view, and then I have to rotate for different view, and again after one rotation I will have to again do the scanning. So I have both translate and rotate. So brute force, you went there, translated, got data, you had something on the detector, then rotate, translate, you get the, so you make all these measurements, right, you know the positions, where the detector is, where the source is, where the detector is, this you know. So where you are recording all the measurements, positions you know, where you measure you know, then you have to do computation. So the logic was, use a pencil beam which was translated to get one projection. So here you notice, what do we mean by one projection? So you are going to get one point, right, one pixel. So if I want one slice, I have to have many of them. So line, I project one, I get one pixel, move, translate, next one, translate, next one. So I kind of get a line projection, right. So I get linearly to get one projection. So the source detector is rotated by small angles, and you repeat this. So you are going to get this one line, right, from different views. Okay. So this is your one first generation setup. What is the advantage? Advantage is, you can probably see brute force, you know this physics, if I send here, if I receive here, I know the path is only, the attenuation is only along this line path. So if I move this, translate it, probably I will go through, depending on my step size and view step size, I will probably go through smaller locations, right, and I will still get data. So from the detector point of view, you notice I am going to send only this, right, along the line, it is so narrow. So I do not really have to bother about your Compton scattering, because even if it scatters, you have only one beam. So that signal is recorded here. If it Compton scattering is there, it probably you are not going to pick several of them. So in that sense, you do not really need a collimator. Okay. So with the model of line integral that we saw in projection radiography, the physics, I think this kind of helped them achieve, when this is plugged into your reconstruction, it made them get the slice. So the disadvantage, of course, you have to cover the entire thing after 360. So you have the idea is you get from all around 360 degrees, but you notice if I say for example we talked about send orange, I get red through the yellows. Okay. If I go completely the other way after 180 degree, what is happening? Oh, I will send red, I will get orange along the same path, participated, right. So in some sense, after 180 degrees, you are not getting a new view, it is the same line path you will get, and therefore even though you cover 360 degree, you want to cover such that after 180 degrees you do not want to get the same information again. Okay. So that has to be ensured, but otherwise the idea is you get multiple rotation is done. So good news about this is the image quality, because you do not have collimator, you can, the scattering is not an issue, you just send one beam, there is no scattering that you have to worry about, and therefore this is simple, straightforward. The detection is also reasonable. So you get some, say for example, you get some image quality, let us say. image itself is new because it is going to give you for the first time information through the slicer. Okay. So, whatever image quality that you have, it is, as long as you see what you see which you did not see before, it is already a huge step. So, you had some acceptable image quality to begin with, but the major challenge was you have to really move, translate, rotate and translate. So, to gather this mechanical translation and rotation, it took time. How much time? It was in the order of about minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes kind of deal. Of course, it depends on the field of view and your step size, rotation step size, all that put, but roughly it is in the order of several minutes, 5-6 minutes just to do the data collection, not accounting for after you get the data you have to do the reconstruction. Okay, so that is not what, just the data collection. Okay, but it allowed you, the first generation, it allowed you to see for the first time what is there through the slice. Okay, so that was a huge step. So if you were working on this in the 60s and 70s when they put the first system together, if you already are an engineer working, what would you do? Right? What would you do? First and foremost would be, well, I see new things, but 5 minutes, 6 minutes is still order of minutes. How can I improvise? How can I improvise and reduce that time, right? So the logic would be, instead of having only one at a time and then scanning, right? Why don't we have few more of these detectors, right? Why don't I have few more of these detectors so that at one shot I can have few parallel lines. Okay. So in some sense, at that point of time, if you are the engineer, you have worked out this ecosystem, you put this thing, one of the major bottlenecks could be, oh, your acquisition time is order of minutes. How do I reduce it? Can we improve that further? Instead of having one detector, can I have simultaneously detect few more detectors, right? Therefore, I can reduce the number of steps I need to do, rotation or steps. So they had few more detectors next to each other. Of course, your pencil beam, instead of pencil beam, we wanted to send a small fan. It is not complete, but then you see that it is wider than your pencil beam was narrow. So this is already diverging, but then you had more number of detectors. So in one go, you could get multiple lines, right? So if you so detect this, if you so arrange this, few angles you already pick, right, because this is at angle, right? So few different angles you already pick from one location. So now the job is, maybe I could step better, maybe I could rotation step, right? I could be little more lenient, because in one step I already have, depending on the arrangement of this, what angles are covered in one fan beam, I can skip those, right. So in that sense, same geometry, same everything else, instead of 1 to 1, they kind of loosened this, had few more. What did that have, that impact? Oh, that impacted the data acquisition time. How did it impact? It brought down the time naturally, right, because your number of stepping size was reduced, number of steps that you need to do reduced, because in one go you got few more. Okay. So it did have a very good effect. This enables acquiring projections from multiple angles simultaneously, and therefore you could do faster. Okay. So therefore a large angle can be stepped through for rotation. So you could actually see, one part of you as an engineer says, wow, now I have reduced the time. This was the challenge posed to me. I have come up with a strategy. I was able to, I had a vendor who could do the source X-ray tube has been there from before. So the detector, somehow we have multiple detectors. There is vendor who know how to manufacture. Give me few different detectors that are next to each other. So I have solved the problem. But then when you do this, what are the physics issues that come in? Oh, when you had pencil beam, you had some quality. So now you go tell your doctor, I have reduced your time, he will be happy. But then he wants to make sure that what happens to the image quality. That is an important aspect. So what do you think is going to be are you going to gain image quality, lose in image quality? What do you think is going to happen? You are conveniently gaining time, reducing the time for acquisition. But what about the quality? Any comments? Well, you look at it, what is the proposition? You are going to have multiple beams, right, that are going to multiple lines of, right, that is going to go source to detector. So in pencil beam first generation you had only one line, so there was no question of the angular incidence, Compton scattering getting detected. Whereas here, if I don't make extra effort, I could pick, right, multiple, I could pick from other angles. So one of the things is, oh, we know this, we solved it before, so we will put collimators. So we will address address that problem. So they had to use collimators. But what did that do? That essentially did one thing is, okay, you put collimator. When we talked about this collimation in detector, right, when we talked about the physics and the instrumentation, what was the deal? Oh, the problem is the signal to noise ratio is important. So you had Compton scattering, but when you try to reduce that, your detection, your efficiency also goes down. So now, because you are not allowing all the signal, you have some threshold, you have some tolerance, you are accepting only through that. So what happens is, for the same, if you will, for the same number of projections that you would use in your first generation, if you use it here, the quality goes down because of your Compton scattering is now coming into picture. Okay, so the image quality goes down. So in order to overcome that, they kind of increase the dose slightly, the exposure slightly. So when they increase the exposure slightly, so you can, so from an image quality point of view, you are now slightly compromising on the safety aspect, but it is still safe. I mean, you have to look at 70s, 80s when they were doing this, they didn't have, I mean, all the things were parallelly evaluating, right? So how much dose, how should we do, all that were also parallelly happening. So they said, okay, this is still okay, we will have a slight increase in exposure, but we will get about the same quality as your first generation, but more importantly, you have significant gain in your time. So what are we talking about? From minutes, you were able to get it down to some tens of seconds, like 20, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, in that range. So it was a significant reduction, right? So now you see so now you get this feedback, you are the engineer, you go back, you say, oh, look, my competitor, we have this edge, we can sell this, it's only 20, 30 seconds, we can get the data. So it's not that bad. For reasonable adult, we could even ask them to hold their breath while you are taking the scan, so that you can reduce motion artifact. So it was fun, right? Good, problem solved. Then what do? Then you say, oh, I want to work on the next product. What the challenge is? I am happy that it came down to 20, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, but I am greedy. What will I do? Oh, by that time you have a ecosystem, all the materials, right, manufacturing is improving. Instead of only few detectors, why cannot I have more of them, right? How many more? Well, instead of having 8 to 16, it's incremental. What I want to do is, I want to get the next best scanner out, next generation out. What will I do? I will say, you know what, here I translate and rotate. What if I have capacity to put detectors, right? Right? Have capacity to put the detectors, so that I entirely avoid the idea of translation. I will only rotate. So, I will increase the fan angle so that it covers the entire patient in one go. So, I avoid the translation, and I can have look at the increase in complexity and cost, right, because now you have so many detectors, small detectors that are placed next to each other to cover the whole line, right. But the advantage is, oh, I could get multiple lines recorded at the same time. So, I do not need to do translation, I will just worry about doing rotation. So, I could significantly reduce the time even further. So, I could get it in the order of seconds data acquisition. The recon part we will come, this is just recording the data, right. So, the idea is fantastic. I could still say this is a good advancement where I have reduced the time even more significantly. But is there, then the natural question is, what happens to the quality? Are you losing somewhere? Well, you notice even in the second generation, when you had multiple lines, you had to do collimator. So, the effect of collimator is going to be there. So, starting upfront, your image quality, right, because you are going to have Compton scattering effect, that is going to have a negative, you have to account for that. Adding to it, you have many elements which are, now the element size is small, you are packing many elements. So, the detector efficiency also goes down slightly. So, everything said and done, you get significant reduction in time, but then you have really increased the cost, and to get the same quality, right, like your before generations, you have to increase the exposure slightly. But again, this is one of those, you have to look at it from that era, right. So, you started seeing CT, you started, people are now going to start to see slices of kidney or abdomen through liver, which they did not see any time before. Now, they are able to start to see it, right. So, their concern is, can we see these new things at a quality that we are now trained. But if you can, increase the speed, throughput, even if there is a slight increase in exposure, that is fine. The benefit outweighs the risk. So, this is again very popular generation, that generation of CT scanner that really pushed the CT to mainstream, where a lot of applications start to follow up. Because notice, I mean, you are now talking about not even a big breath hold, right. You could just hold on for a breath for few seconds, and you can take the data. So, it is very significant advantage in that regard. So, fine, you are the guy who joined now, the biomedical engineer who has joined, you are working, your boss is working in the third generation, you are the engineer who are working on this detail, you are going to become the project lead and you want to get to the next generation. What would you suggest? What would be your approach? Well, by looking at all this 1, 2 and now third, what else can I do, right? What else can I do? Now, I am rotating my source and detector, right, this geometry, I am rotating both the source and detector. So, next you are going to say, why should I rotate both? I have my detector technology evolving, right, and why, instead of rotating, what if I can arrange this instead of just line, what if I can arrange this around the circle?